Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to episode 9 of the AtlantaCast. We are getting close to the end of season 1 now. Very exciting. But yeah, last episode was the club, and this episode is I never checked the titles of these.
Juneteenth.
Yeah, June. Oh, no, I should have remembered that because this episode is season 1, episode 9, which is the 19th. And it's like
I didn't
that's
catch that.
Juneteenth. Yeah. I
Very
think that's
nice.
a little. I think that's a little Easter egg. I don't know. I like to think that these things are intentional.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. But anyway, as always, you guys can support us on Patreon. We majorly appreciate that. $5 tier will get you a shout out at the end of these episodes. $10 tier will get you access to episodes 2 weeks ahead of time. So you could be listening to season 2, episode 1 right now, if you are on Patreon. And of course, the third tier is going to get you access to bonus episodes of the AtlantaCast, where we tackle other Donald Glover-esque related media kind of stuff. Although, funnily enough, this episode actually is not directed or written by Donald Glover, and it's not even directed by Hiro Murai either. It's directed by one Janiska Bravo and written by Stefani Robinson, which I just found out. And I should be keeping up more with like the specific directors and writers of each of these episodes because like I feel like Atlanta is a show where it varies a lot. Like each episode can be wildly different than the last, and I feel like I should go back and really look at each different episode to see if like the weirder ones or the ones that
Who wrote them?
break from the mold a little bit are written by any different people. And I mean, in this case, I think there is definitely a different tone than normal.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
so. I did actually have one or two notes about the writing. I'll come to it, but
yeah.
I did not notice that it was a different writer on this episode. I did notice
Yeah.
like
Well, what?
the
Yeah. What was
absence
one of
of
the
Hero.
examples that you pointed out or that you were thinking of?
Uh, there was a phrase or a line that one of the characters that were newly introduced in this scene, Monique, she pulls from a Tyler Perry movie,
Hmm.
and it made me stop and think like how to analyze that line, and I won't give it away right now, but it did make me think like the writer had some Tyler Perry knowledge or had at least seen the movie that I was not aware of. And there was one other line. I'll get to it when I scan through my notes here as we're talking. But yeah, I think I agree with you about the different episodes having different tones, and it is probably a reflection of the writing. And there, it's really good in that sense. I think how they
Yeah.
integrate the themes across many different writers and
Yeah. And it
I
just
guess
like it keeps
different
the show from
directors.
getting boring.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
for
I've
sure.
seen so many shows where they try to keep a consistency within each episode
Hmm.
throughout an entire season or the entire show, and a lot of the time to me that just like, especially when I'm watching kind of week by week, it just like I get tired of I get exhausted of just like coming back for the same thing every week. But like with
Yeah,
Atlanta, like especially on the first time through, it's just like you have no idea what you're gonna get next episode.
yeah. My wife, your mother, watches a lot of Netflix and Hulu, and I can't keep up with her binge viewing habits, and it's not because of time or being able to stay up late. It's usually because I can't watch the same formula presented over and over. The characters are interesting for about one or two seasons, and then it's like, okay, I know what's going to happen next. But this is not like that. I think Atlanta breaks the mold of many of those things that you see on TV or on and Netflix on streaming services. So let's get into it. Episode 9, Juneteenth, which, as I think everybody knows, it's a celebration of the emancipation of slaves back in the
Hmm.
1800s. We open the the first scene is Ern waking up in bed with an unidentified woman, a woman of color, but not Vanessa, as we find out pretty quickly. And he lights a joint. He takes a hit off of a joint, but then he suddenly realizes that he has to be somewhere, and he's scrambling around to try to get dressed. And as he's pulling his pants on, the woman sort of rolls over. She's kind of out of focus, so we don't immediately see. Well, I guess we never really know who that is, only that it's not Vanessa. And um, he gets up and has a few awkward words with her, and he says thanks, like like he had sex with this woman. She asked him if he's coming back, and he sort of pauses, but then just says no, like this is just a one night stand. So we we start the episode with Ern having a one night stand. uh, I think, we kind of already know that Ern and Van have uh, less than perfect relationship, but here we see that Ern is obviously not being monogamous, and so in this sense, he's not fully committed to Van. And I
Yeah,
think
I
we know
mean,
he
yeah, to
loves
be
Van,
fair, like I do think
but
that before it had kind of been established that although they did have a daughter together, they were not exclusive.
right,
Like I think Van said that she like had had like looked around and kind of not dated other guys, but like
she was planning on going out, without him. I think she did
yeah,
acknowledge she had a date at one point.
yeah.
Um,
But I mean either way, this clearly doesn't really go over well with Van.
right,
Uh
she's
I think
outside
it's
waiting for
yeah,
him.
like I think it's kind of intentionally intended to be like both because he's like putting her out of her way because like she has to wait and it's like getting in the way of her business because she's going to this party where she's gonna hopefully make a lot of good connections, right? But also it's just the extra sting of like it's because he was sleeping with another woman
Yeah,
that like makes it like just like that it makes it that more just like that he's not really considering how she might feel.
yeah. So they're in the car driving. There's kind of an awkward silence. She asks him if he's high. I guess she smells it on him. He rolls down the. He says not really, but he rolls down the car windows. Then she rolls them back up because says she's concerned about her hair. I guess getting messed up. And they have this kind of comical fight over the window going up and down. Um, but then she explains how important this party is to Ern, that she wants him to pose as or they she wants them to pose as a married couple. Because Van wants to make a good impression on this Monique woman who's a high society person. She lives in a nice big home. So she's a black woman. She's married to this white guy who we're introduced to as Craig, and it's a Juneteenth day celebration at their home. They walk in the door. There's like obviously very nice home. There's black men on the stairwell like singing a cappella, which is kind of odd. As Van and Ern walk in this home, they're introduced to her husband Craig. Craig claims to recognize Ern from what he thought was the country club, and gives him this weird handshake, which is it's kind of funny. Like
Yeah.
he's you're immediately led to believe that this Craig guy is trying to be black, and we find that out like repeatedly as we go here. Ern makes a few snarky comments, but he ends up playing along with this act that Van wants him to do, so that the hosts think that those two are a married couple. Um,
Hmm.
and then Ern goes to the bar to get a drink, and he encounters this rude bartender who's making drinks with these weird alliterative names that reference Juneteenth. Um, and so this is all just setting the stage for the interactions between the hosts and Van and Ern. Monique it offers to introduce Van to other important people. So she's kind of taking Van under her wing and saying how Van can basically have whatever she wants. There's important people here, and she can introduce her to any of them. And
Mm.
Monique seems impressed by Van's apparent husband, who's Ivy Leaguer. I guess she's told that Ern went to Princeton at some point. Um, so I don't know if you have any comments at this point. Um, the next scene with uh, Craig in the office is a one I want to talk about. So I'll stop and let you comment if you have any comments before we get into this
Oh, well, I mean,
exchange.
I guess, the notable detail of this little office scene is that in the background you can see Craig has a "Awaken My Love" album art on his wall, which is the album by Donald Glover,
Ah,
Childish Gambino.
I didn't see
Um,
that. That's good.
that's the one with it's a black person's face with like white with like these neon blue like this neon blue kind of headpiece
Uh-huh.
around it, and it's just in like a void black background. Really really great album, but that album takes a lot more like kind of soul influence, and seems to be getting
Cool.
more, I suppose, historically black, if you will. But I like that. I think it's interesting that he chose to, because I Donald does this again. He puts his album art in on the wall of another character who I'll point out when it comes up. But I based on the pattern, I think that he's doing it kind of intentionally as a bit of a reference and a observation of how he feels people are or how he feels people are consuming his music, specifically like the different eras of his music. And I don't know, it might be telling as to
Hmm.
what he thinks about it, but in this case, you know, he's putting this album that he made that is very much like a I interpret the album a lot as kind of like Donald's reflection on his place as a black man in America, and how he's like kind of trying to like find a a livable life, or like a comfortable life with a woman who he's interested in, so while being surrounded by the chaos of America to a to the black light, I guess, black people, not just a black man. But um I find it interesting that he's decided to place that, or I mean, I guess it maybe it wasn't even Donald in this case. It could have very much been a Janiska. I think that's how you pronounce her name, since she was the director of this episode. But either way, I think, you know, that could be sending in a message about how white you know, audiences, listeners of Donald's music, and you know, I guess we could extrapolate other types of historically black music, might consider themselves like more knowledgeable on the culture, and you know, and as we see in this scene, you know, Craig is very much like trying to teach Donald about, or Ern trying to teach Ern about his roots as a black man. And Ern obviously does not take too kindly to that. That's like a big theme of this episode, is that like black people do not like being educated about their own culture by white people. Education in very big air quotes. Uh,
So yeah, I mean, just to take a step back then. So the
yeah.
scene is Ern entering Craig's office, and actually, I my eyes were drawn to the photos of Martin Luther King, and there was like some other African artwork on the wall.
All right.
And then Ern walks over to a sort of dark painting, which is a depiction of a black man slaying an eagle with a sword. It's like apparently like eviscerating this eagle, or uh, and it's at this point that Craig walks in the room, and Craig immediately starts giving a quote. He says, "Nobody can give you freedom. Nobody can give you equality or justice or anything. If you're a man, you'll take it, or you take it." And that's a quote from Malcolm X. At first, you think Craig is saying that himself, which is like a weird way to, like talk to any guest in your home. But he says he's quoting Malcolm X, and you can see the look on Ern's face is like a little like taken aback or just like surprised. Ern questions the interpretation of the Malcolm X quote, and Craig responds sort of arrogantly, just saying that is the only interpretation. Uh, it accurately depicts the plight of the contemporary black man, and that's why I painted it. So yeah, I mean
Hmm.
he's like very quickly the viewer sees that this guy thinks he knows a lot about the black culture, despite being a white man. Uh,
Yeah.
so you know, as I've said in previous episodes, there's an identity issue already here. The identity paradox. Craig, the white man, lecturing Ern about uh, not only black culture but about his manhood. He's this Malcolm X quote is,
Yeah.
uh,
I don't know if I'd specifically call it like an identity issue. I think like
well, Craig's
it's more so,
character,
yeah.
not the episode. Um, the episode really
Like
isn't
Craig
about
seems
black
entirely
identity.
sincere in this
Yes, yeah,
episode, you know?
definitely.
Like I don't get any impression that he's sort of grappling with an identity that isn't truly him or that he's like trying to put on a mask to anybody. I think he's being like completely sincere and
Well,
honest. Like he has no qualms about what his identity is. It's just that that identity is like very uncomfortable for like everyone around him seemingly.
yes, that's right. That's a good way to put it, actually. Yeah, he's like well too aware of his whiteness, or and but like the his interest in black culture is like extreme, and we'll come to that in a minute. I have some other comments about not an identity crisis on the part of this character, but just again, Atlanta is showing us like here's a white guy who's very interested in black culture. You know, he's kind of taken a unique place in this episode. Um, so so yeah, Ern seems a little confused with this exchange. He after the guy quotes Malcolm X, he just says wow, and then there's like some back and forth. Craig learns that Ern works in the music business, and he says, "Oh, that's nice, a brother on the business side of music," and
Hmm.
and he says that music is an integral part of African American culture, but it's been stripped of you. Black artists are products for white American consumption and appropriation. So he's clearly taken up the cause, on behalf of um, of Black America, and he's trying to identify, I guess, specifically with Black musicians, or not identify, but he's trying to acknowledge that they're
Hmm.
either disenfranchised in some way, or not serving their, they're not getting their share, perhaps, of the music industry pie. I actually took this opportunity to sort of do a little research on the music industry in general, and it's quite complicated. Like
Oh
we've had
yeah.
this discussion before, about Paperboy's role in how the club culture or the rap music industry, sort of pigeonholes people into certain categories, or on the flip side of that, like the the artists themselves taking on a certain persona to try to capitalize on image, like the image of a thug or something.
Yeah.
That's what we discussed in the last episode. But like I think it might be useful for us to continue to dive into this topic, because it turns out that black um, black musicians, there's a long history of African Americans who've made music, but there's also like Motown in Detroit. There are black producers and black
Oh yeah.
record own what do you call it, record producers,
Labels.
record labels. Thank you. And you know whether or not they've been the victim of racism or not is kind of like, I guess we would just reflexively say yes, but like I don't know enough details. Like whatever, like is Motown still in existence today? And what about all these other new rap uh, record labels, and how has the industry changed with the advent of streaming services and the distribution of music across the internet, or
I
Spotify,
mean, I get
Apple
a lot of
Music.
my perspective on this stuff from the music itself. Like I like diving into the lyrics that uh, relevant artists
Yeah,
are using in their music, and listening to people who are sort of reviewing or analyzing that music, and other just like individual voices in the community who seem to
yeah.
know what they're talking about.
And in that episode that we reviewed last, what was that, episode 7 or 8, with the club?
8.
8. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I actually kind of did the research sort of after the fact. I should have had it prepared for that previous episode, because I realized as I was talking that I really don't fully appreciate all the different aspects of the music industry, because we're seeing these characters who are the the content creators, so to speak, or the musicians that are actually making the music. But we also saw the club owner that episode. Previous episode we saw like a DJ character. Um, we haven't, and I don't, and there was a little bit of reference to the record labels, but we haven't actually seen that sort of high level industry executive character appear yet. I think we're gonna get some more of this kind of uh, uh, character, some more of these characters that represent the industry. So we can put it on the back burner for now, but as we move forward, I think we should dive into that. Like, what is the relationship between the actual artist and the record label, and what kind of
I
contract
mean,
do you have to sign to get your
I
music
mean,
on
yeah,
a label?
I'll be honest. I don't know exactly. I think it it varies, but I'm not. I'm mostly I feel like I'm more knowledgeable on how the artists feel about their individual situation, and
Yeah,
kind of the broad strokes that they and conclusions that they draw from their own lives and their own experiences in the system,
yeah. The
and
lyrics
not
and the
so much
music
like
oftentimes reflect the creator, the content creator's life and what they've
yeah,
experienced. But I think to
yeah.
understand Donald Glover and what his experience in the rap world has been, I think it's good to sort of have that grounding of like, what must it be like for somebody like him
I
to
mean, in
get
this situation, I
music
feel
made.
yeah. If we're trying to, I feel like if we're trying to understand Donald Glover's, you know, like situation in the industry and his experience thus far, then it would be like useful to, you know, go do more research into him specifically.
Yeah, so let's maybe
But
put
I
that
mean,
on
we
the
can
list
definitely
of.
do that on when we talk about some of the music videos
Yeah,
and the
that's
contents
exactly
of
what I was going to
those
say. Is like that could be good fodder for some of our extra
bonus
content.
episodes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
bonus content. So
yeah,
it doesn't really
yeah. But
impact
anyway,
this episode specifically. So let's move into this discussion that Ern and Craig are having. Ern or Craig offers him a real drink, right? So he after he had this sort of rude exchange with the bartender who gave him some sort of fancy drink, Craig gives him a glass of Hennessy, which Hennessy, I don't know if you know it, but it's kind of a stereotypically black cognac. It's a drink that gained
mm,
popularity in the black community some time ago. So Ern recognizes that, oh, he gave me a Hennessy. That's another sort of curious factoid that Ern is taking in here. Ern asks Craig about his education, because he's like, why, he's trying to probe Craig for why he's so interested in African American culture, and he's asking him, "Are you an archaeologist in African studies?" And Craig's like, "No, I'm an optometrist," which that kind of made me laugh, like why? Where does this come from? Anyway, Craig describes a pilgrimage to Africa where he, quote, had to pay my respects and ask for forgiveness. And he's like, you know what I mean, right? He's talking to Ern. Ern's like, no,
mm,
no, I don't. I don't know what you mean. so there's this kind of curious uh, disconnect with Ern, and Ern is still sort of trying to figure this guy out. Craig seems surprised that Ern has never been to Africa and doesn't know where his ancestors are from. He's trying to sort of pin down his genealogy. But Ern has a good line. He's like, there's this spooky thing called slavery that happened and erased my
My
ethnic
entire
identity.
ethnic identity.
Yeah, that's a good line. It's kind of
Yeah.
impactful for
No, I think that
the
that kind of
white
sums
audience,
up the
especially.
entire that kind of sums up the entire relationship between Craig and Ern. Is just that like Craig is I mean, Craig is obsessed with genealogy to the point that he doesn't understand that, like, because this point has come up before, but the conceit of African Americans as distinct from just Africans is the result of the transatlantic slave trade, where you know Africans were forcefully taken and sold and brought over to America, where they were not treated as human beings. They were not like allowed to continue maintaining the cultures and traditions that they had back in Africa, which is one of the things that separates that group of people from every other group of slaves. I'm not entirely sure on the exact history of slavery, but to my knowledge, like um, African Americans experienced like an especially intense cleansing, if so you will, and
Ethnic
a
cleansing.
a destruction of what was their culture prior, and basically they had to start from the ground up. So to suggest that that Africa is African Americans' motherland, is like, oh, that's where your roots are, is kind of inaccurate, because their roots were forcibly severed, and they had to plant new roots in a new country and
I
form an
wonder if
entirely
now
new
that we
culture.
have things like 23andMe, I wonder if African Americans can pin that down. Like, are they from a specific,
Oh, well, absolutely
sub-region
you
of
can. Yeah,
Africa?
yeah, you can absolutely do that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
As for how, people are taking that information, if people are trying to, I guess, like, go back and kind of undo that heretic severing, I don't know. I haven't heard of that kind of thing happening so much. I heard like a comedian once bring it up as like a comical thing that like, he's a black comedian from Africa, and he had a joke about how some African American audience members would come up to him after the show and be like, "Oh, I want to go to Africa because it's the motherland." And he like kind of made fun of them as like, "What are you talking about? It's not your motherland. You're from here," or
yeah,
whatever. Like,
yeah.
so he was kind of making fun of that attitude. So I get the general impression, and combined with this show and what I find to be like common sense, but
I mean, it
I get the
actually,
general impression that what Craig is implying by that, like, genealogy is kind of rules all and determines what one's identity should be. He feels that simply by being born a white man means that he must pay respects and ask for forgiveness to a group of people who, you know, frankly speaking, his ancestors don't like he doesn't like if he owes an apology to anybody, it's like Ern
yeah,
specifically. It's
yeah.
it's Al, but he chose to apologize to people from Africa, the country, even though like that is a very different demographic than African Americans.
Yeah, yeah,
So just
it's really like
really
a head
tone deaf.
scratcher. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
I,
which is
I,
the
it actually
ultimate
did make
criticism
me
of
think
Craig.
about, because he used the word ethnic identity. My ethnic
Hmm.
identity was erased, and not to suggest that like any white European immigrants experienced that kind of like identity erasure, but like a lot of people lost their roots when they came over. Like I've always been trying, not always, but I've been trying to like follow our name, our last name, and it get
Yeah.
and like all those people that came through Ellis Island and like were foreigners, white foreigners that had their names changed. They kind of everybody
Mm.
loses their identity at that point, and it's unfortunate. You'd like to know, what
Yeah, I
connection
mean,
your
like on
name
like a
has.
personal, yeah, but like I feel like that's kind of on like, I mean, yeah, like as you acknowledge that like it's not like to the degree that African
Right, right.
Americans
You were bought.
experienced,
Those
and
people
I mean,
came
I
here
have a
by their own
friend,
choosing, and
yeah, I mean, like I have a friend who he actually was able to track his last name like hundreds of years back, like way past when people first when the
is his name spelled the
Europeans.
same as it was in his mother,
I
whatever
don't
his
know
motherland was?
actually, but he gave me a whole history lesson on his name,
Well,
and
the point I
he's
was trying to make was like now that we have DNA technology and we can start to connect like people's DNA profile to different regions of the world, it seems like you could start to zero in on names like our last name. Like there's some you can make some pretty good guesses as to what it might have been based
yeah.
on like the 23andMe profile that I got or that you got, and you could start to like connect the dots like, oh, this is what my ancestors name really was, and this is really who they were. Um, but anyway, like that's neither here nor there for
Yeah,
the
yeah,
episode.
it's just that like with like African American people, it wasn't like it was like obviously their names were changed,
Yeah,
or so
completely
they
changed.
probably their names were erased. They didn't even have
Exactly,
names.
yeah.
And like and then like I feel like knowing as an African American, like knowing like, oh, my genealogical ancestors are people who had these cultures and practices, but that doesn't really have any effect on your life now, whereas like you could say that you can, whereas names and stuff can get a little muddied with like specific families. The
Hmm.
overall direction of a culture of people can be pretty easily tracked,
Yeah, and I
or can follow a pretty natural progression, right?
yes,
Whereas with like African Americans, it was doing that, and then it was very much artificially stopped and started for
yeah,
a particular sect of people.
and like in the grand scheme of things, like I'm just speaking on behalf of myself, really, just
Yeah.
or maybe for white Americans, like what does it really matter if like like 5 generations ago, like exactly where your European roots are, like it's nothing more than just like a curiosity. To me, like once you're that far removed from a culture, like we're not European, we're American, and
Mm.
uh, you know. That said,
Yeah.
it's a different experience as an African American, like
Yeah,
Ern
yeah,
says, to
because
have
you're
his
yeah, because
ethnicity
like going
completely
back that many
erased.
generations, you can actually like draw parallels to like yeah, I was gonna say like you were kind of like what's the point? And it's like I kind of agree with that as a white person. But I've heard that with like black people, it can be and as it kind of comes up in this show later on that like the uh the point, so to speak, that it has beyond just kind of like curiosity could be that it could explain, a contributing factor as to why you might be in the socioeconomic position that you're in,
Hmm.
because some specific families can be traced back, and like 5 generations isn't that long, uh, in grand global like
120 years or
scale.
something.
Yeah, yeah, like in like global scale, that's not that long.
Yeah,
Um, I don't know if there's a younger like culture of people than African Americans, which started about 250 years ago. Uh, but
yeah,
with knowing that if you know that like you like came from a or you came from that your like ancestors were working in like this particular state or this area that where slavery was, I don't know, particularly harsh, then that could describe, well, oh, okay, then, maybe my great-great-grandparents were in a really, really bad situation, and then that kind of bleeds over throughout your, by not giving your great-grandparents the greatest opportunities, which means that
Sure.
your grandparents don't get the opportunities and that kind of thing. And like,
Well, here's a
that argument
question.
can be made.
This is probably not politically correct, but how many generations removed from, let's say, Jim Crow era, how many generations removed do you have to be before it becomes irrelevant?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'm like the person to answer that question.
Because like
I mean,
I
like,
have the same like thoughts about my own genealogy or my own,
mhm.
research into my ancestry. Is like, yeah, I I know about my grandparents and a little bit about their grandparents.
Like,
Um,
do you consider yourself lucky or unlucky based on who your great-great-grandparents were?
yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot about the world that they grew up in and
Yeah.
how different it was, and how much less technology they had, or how I am sort of privileged to have sort of risen out of lower
Yeah.
middle income status. So there's that. Uh,
Yeah.
but that can
I'd
go the other
say,
way too, I guess, if you've fallen down the
yeah.
socioeconomic ladder.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I
But
mean,
it's
I can
still it's a function of like certain number of generations, because I mean we all become irrelevant in the grand scheme of history. Like people forget.
yeah,
Maybe that's not so much the case as we have everything
get better
recorded on
documentative technology,
video.
yeah.
Yeah, so but even so, like if somebody listens to this podcast, 100 years from now, like, does it matter? Like, will my great grandchildren listen to this someday and say, "Hey, that was my great grandfather talking like he knows something about
Yeah.
African
I
American
mean,
culture"?
I guess I don't know if these kinds of studies have been done, but like I would imagine that you can maybe find some meaning in in your genealogy by kind of looking at the trends of like, if you can get enough data and enough like, what's the word, like unbiased data on
Mm-hmm.
like different groups of people, and you can say, okay, so we have these 10,000 people that are in this bracket of socioeconomic, you know, hierarchy
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. And then we can say, okay, where did their ancestors come from? And if we
Mm-hmm.
see a trend that says, like, oh, they came from, generally speaking, higher socioeconomic families, then, that can tell you, depending on how far you go back, like,
Mm-hmm.
if the trend holds, I'd say, yeah, if the trend holds like several generations back,
Yeah.
then you can say that, for people who several generations ago, their families were in poorer socioeconomic positions because of a very unfair system
Mm-hmm.
that they were born into, then, you could say that that person nowadays is being affected by that.
Right.
I mean, obviously, those studies have, to my knowledge, yet to been performed, and there's a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
mean, I definitely
debate over
think
that. And
the
obviously, that doesn't
economics
mean that,
is the important thing here, because we if we could magically undo uh,
yeah, yeah,
the erasure that Ern talks about, um, that doesn't change anything. If if all African Americans suddenly were able to trace their lineage back to their motherland, it's not going to change their socioeconomic status, and that to me is ultimately where the problems lie.
well, yeah, I mean, the knowledge doesn't necessarily do anything on its own. It's what you do with the knowledge, but yeah,
Okay, moving on.
yeah,
So Craig is sort of, to my viewership, is unexplainably fixated on on African American culture. Uh, so like the questions that I wrote down
I
is,
have the explanation. It's he wants to be an ally, but he doesn't realize that that means you have to be a side character and not the main
mm,
character.
oh, well put, well put.
Yeah,
I thought, I thought maybe there was going to be some connection with his wife, and we do find out some more
there
information,
is.
yeah,
There is.
from her directly. Um, and why does he need forgiveness? Why did he feel the need to go over to Africa to ask forgiveness? When it would be more appropriate to ask forgiveness from somebody in the states. So this seemed to me like virtue signaling and maybe some sort of cultural appropriation in some weird way. Um,
Yeah, I can
yeah,
see that.
you know. Okay, so next scene, Ern is asking Van. They're standing at the buffet table, and he asks her if she really wants to continue on with this party. He's kind of feeling the need to like bug out and leave. And he actually makes a statement here that I had to do a little thinking about. He said, "I feel like I'm in a Spike Lee directed version of Eyes Wide Shut." Are you familiar with that movie?
No, but I knew that you would be, and so I didn't feel the need to research it
Okay.
because I knew you would
Yeah,
tell me
it's a
about it.
Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman movie. It's a pretty
Uh,
bizarre movie. I only saw it once a long time ago, and it's like sort of erotic. It's about these. Uh, well, actually, I'll just read the Wikipedia or wherever this I got this blurb. It explores the role that fantasies of strangers play in our sex lives. And it suggests that married people ultimately are also strangers to each other. There's
hmm.
so it's a kind of a weird movie, but I
So
think
saying like just like married people don't necessarily know everything about one another.
well I think Ern is implying that Craig is living out some sort of fantasy, and this
Okay.
comes back. Uh,
Oh yeah, yeah, that checks out.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, he's living the fantasy of being like the white savior
yes,
to black people.
and
He's
Monique
like, look at all
actually
this good I'm
touches on
doing
this.
for yeah.
So
It's like I said earlier, where like the knowledge of like how black people are marginalized doesn't necessarily make you a good person, because if you put that knowledge to practice by like throwing parties with like all of the drinks named after like slavery, like as like references to slavery, like that in and of itself doesn't really do anything, like,
yeah, it's just odd.
and it makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah, as does the food on the table. We don't see it, but Ern sees something on the food buffet
Yeah.
that resembles a slave ship, and
Yeah.
both Ern and Van stop and stare at it, and Van like because Ern is kind of pestering Van about like what they're doing here, and Van just turns to him and says, "Do you think I enjoy having to prostitute myself for an
Hmm.
opportunity? And can we
Yeah.
just once pretend that we aren't who we are?" Because and then she adds this, which is kind of a zinger. She says, "Because we both know that you're good at pretending." So that was kind of a mean thing to throw in there at the end, but like if you sort of dissect those couple statements that Van makes, I think we see why Van is at this party. She wants to, I guess, get a job or a better job because
Yeah. She wants to get better connections.
yeah, and make connections with these high society people. Um, but she also, I think she's still sort of in the back of her mind a little pissed off that Van just had this one night stand and
Earn.
I'm sorry, yeah, earned had,
Yeah.
and even though like to be precise about the use of her words, like we both know that you're good at pretending. I felt like that was a little bit unfair to Earn because he wasn't hiding that. He walked out the front door and like it wasn't like he was uh, pretending like he was at that woman's house for some other reason. There was really no discussion or dialogue between Van and Ern in the car, but anyway, she gave him a zinger there, and that kind of shut Ern up, and he just went about the ruse of acting as if Van and Ern are there as a married couple. So I don't blame I also wrote down here that you can't blame Van for wanting to get a good job, but this again to me is like pointing at her own sort of identity crisis. She
Hmm.
thinks she needs to pretend to be somebody she's not, and she has to convince Ern to go along with it.
Yeah, I mean, whether or not she feels or whether or not she should feel like she needs to, I think the fact of the matter is that pretending to be a high society citizen is going to benefit her if she follows through with it,
That's what
Like
she
her friend
thinks.
tells
Yeah,
her, well, her friend tells her explicitly, like, I will get you connections. You
yeah,
can do anything. Like, I will get you any job you want. You want to be like a fashion artist or something like that. You can do it. You want to be like a higher level teacher. I'll make it happen. Like, so Vanessa, like, and given that she's trying to care for her kid, I definitely don't think that you can like really blame her
right.
for, yeah. I mean,
Do
like you
we
said,
know how
can't blame her
those
for,
two know each other?
what was it?
Van,
Not sure.
Van and Monique. I don't
I
think
honestly
we're
don't know.
told. Yeah,
I get the impression Van seems to be in pretty good connection with some people from her past.
yeah.
Uh,
But we're not
and
led to. We're
specifically
not
people
given that
who,
info.
yeah, I get the impression, yeah, like this is all speculation, but I get the impression based on the people that Van knows that like she was friends with other women in like high school, and they went
Mm,
on to, I think I made this point before, but the difference between Van and a lot and the other, specifically the higher class African American women who she seems to be friends with, is that they all basically attached themselves to different classes of men.
yeah, yeah. That's a good
Whereas
point.
Van ended up getting pregnant uh, and with Ern's kid, and these other women, her friend, I forget her name, but the one who's traveling the globe with
Yeah,
basketball
who,
NBA
who
players.
I
She's
accused of being a
obviously,
prostitute.
yeah, she's obviously sort of riding the success of those athletes,
Yeah,
and her friend here, Monique,
yeah.
or yeah,
Monique.
Monique is became the wife, and she says, later in the episode we get to a scene where her and Monique are having a conversation where they're kind of talking about their husbands, and she, mentions she's just smoking a cigarette, and she mentions that, you know, Craig got the black wife that he always wanted, and I got money,
Yeah,
you know. So
yeah,
she's
yeah.
kind of spelling out their
Kind
dynamic,
of a
which is,
indictment of her
hmm
character. Like she's in it for
yeah,
the
and
money.
yep, yeah, and I mean like, uh, and once again, like I think when we were talking about the athletes who Van's other friend was dating, the point came up that like those athletes have the money they have because they're appealing to a wider audience,
Hmm.
and then with Monique, she has the money she has because she's appealing to this rich white guy. So it's kind of just like money trickles down, and you play the game. You put
Take
on
your
the
part.
mask that
Yeah.
will appeal to the upper ups, and it works. You get money, and that's a system that Van and Ern both vehemently dislike,
But
and
they're
seem to.
drawn into.
Well, yeah. In this case, Van, it seemed like the motivation of taking care of her child is
Mhm.
enough to motivate her to put on the mask. But of course, by episode's end, it comes out that
It comes off.
that's not. Yeah. Like the mask comes off, and it becomes obvious that she really really hates wearing the mask.
So in the next scene, Ern is putting on an act for an older woman who we
Hmm.
come to understand is a playwright and a director, and she thinks Ern is funny and handsome. Ern and Van both pretend to be interested. They make small talk. Ern notices that Van is drinking a lot, and she's getting a little sloppy. Uh, the woman says, "quote Black Americans have to keep fighting for good art," which I don't know. I don't really know if we're supposed to analyze that or anything. It doesn't really seem. It just seems to be a generic statement. I wrote myself a note like, what does that really mean? But anyway, Van and Ern both nod approvingly, and you can see they're kind of struggling to keep up this act because the same thing happens in the next scene where we see this very tall black reverend who's preaching to Van and Ern. He's the preacher or the reverend of a mega church. Apparently, he's bragging about that. Van says they don't really have time for church. Ern makes some silly comment about how they're already spending time with at-risk Filipino youth. So Ern is really embellishing the the ruse, the fake persona that they're putting on, and the the preacher seems kind of like a caricature to me as well. He offers to teach them about money management and how to treat your woman, and this kind of actually makes Van sort of smile. I think she's again thinking about the fact that Ern just had a one night stand, and her supposed husband is standing there listening to this preacher. So those two scenes are kind of, they're not really throwaway scenes, but they're just emphasizing that these people are, they're either acting or they're putting on a facade. They're stunting, as Ern might say. They're all sort of bragging about themselves in one way or another. The next scene, we see Ern, is this sort of theme sort of continues on, and they're standing in front of three young black women, and Ern is really laying it on thick now. He's showering Van with compliments. He describes her as a mother, a partner, and a provider, and he says how much he loves and respects her. And you can kind of see Van's face kind of turn serious at one point, and she's kind of like, maybe you can kind of see that maybe she's rethinking like this whole phony act that they're putting on, or either that, or maybe she just like heard these words coming from Ern and was kind of hoping that there was some glimmer of truth in those words. Maybe, I don't know, but it was kind of an interesting little bit of acting on Van's part, because
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that because, the immediately following sequence where, Ern, like, Van leaves, and she just asks to be excused, right as one of the women is, like, offering her a position at, like, a theater group, I think, and she's just like, can I excuse myself, passing up this opportunity to make a good connection, and Ern follows her, and Van just says, like, that was mean,
yeah, yeah.
and, which I think
Well,
is
she
pretty
breaks
clearly.
down in the restroom and she starts crying and she's like, "What the fuck am I
Yeah,
doing?"
and which like is as for how she feels about what Ern just did. This is like a really interesting. I feel like either there's a lot going on here or it's really simple, which is just that Ern is he's like, fine, fuck it, I'm just gonna play along to your pretend idea to make these people like us, and he goes to the extreme opposite of like contrasting entirely the fact that he was just a one, like he says specifically, gun to my head, I don't think I could look at another woman
Yeah,
in that line, even though that he woke up that morning in
yes.
another woman's bed,
No,
and
I think
so
he's purposely laying it on thick to make Van uncomfortable.
yeah, you think.
Yeah,
I think that's, yeah, like the dynamic between Ern and Van is really interesting. It's like
yeah.
it's
But like
it's yeah, I
the
don't know.
interesting thing is, like we saw from previous episodes, that I think Ern really does care for Van, and
Yeah, well,
it's mostly due to the fact that they have a child together. But I mean, there
yeah.
does seem to be some genuine moments between them here and there, and
Yeah,
so
that's
like
that's the
you
thing
could
that makes it
imagine
so
him saying
interesting and
that
complex.
in a genuine way, right? Like him
Yeah,
complimenting
you
Van.
can definitely imagine that. You definitely get the impression that there's some truth to that. Um, but like as Van says earlier, he's really good at putting on a mask. And early in the episode at the beginning, when they're driving to the party, she mentions how this is going to be really important for Lottie. And Ern says, "Why?" Says, "I know. Why else do you think I'd be doing this?"
Yeah, yeah,
As if the latter half of that sentence would be, because I love you. Like, obviously not. Like, I don't
right.
care about you. Uh,
Yeah,
so
it
the
is
the
kind of a
tangible details would,
complex
yeah,
dynamic.
the tangible details would be pointing towards that Ern really does not care that much about Van, and he only really wants to take care of Lottie, and he feels like his music can do that, and he doesn't really he doesn't really care for how Van tries to accomplish that. He's kind of just like focused on his own shit.
Yeah. So Van sets out to get drunk. She's really after having this little brief exchange with Ern and her telling him that he's being mean. She says, "I'm going to go get drunk," but Monique pulls her away while Craig and Ern, or while Craig actually pulls Ern away. Or he's asking Ern to listen to his poetry reading, which we find out later what that's all about. But the next scene is Monique and Van on the balcony. Monique's smoking a cigarette, complaining about her husband's quote black people as a hobby shit. So we see right here that Monique is kind of, she recognizes her husband is, and she describes it as a hobby, which it seems pretty fitting, based on what was going through my mind in the first couple scenes, in the office.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's the other depiction of how I think a lot of black people see white people who kind of have this savior complex, is because, as a black person, like when you have a hobby, you can put it down and kind of ignore it and get back to it, the next weekend. But as a black person, there's no putting it down.
Yeah.
Being black is your everyday life. It affects every decision that you make, no matter how small, and you see how being black kind of influences your day-to-day interactions. I think last episode I mentioned how like Ern makes an offhand comment where he says like, that people can tell I drink juice as opposed to, I guess as opposed to like alcohol or something, and I mentioned how that's a instance of like blackness that I had never thought about, that I've since watching that episode I've heard black people describe how like it's seen as kind of like as like uncool and unmanly to like drink like lemonade or whatever. Like you drink like Coke or other or soda or other or like alcohol and stuff like that. But I guess it would be like analogous to as if you as like a straight white guy ordering like a fruity concoction at a bar or whatever, and people would be like, "Oh, is he gay?" or something like that. And it's like,
are you admitting something here about your
yes,
your lemonade
absolutely
hobby?
Yes, I drink lemonade at every opportunity.
You've always liked
it
lemonade.
Absolutely says something about who I am. It is a core component of my personality, and I'll put that in my Twitter bio.
What does it say that I like bourbon?
But yeah, like just that with a big issue that I think a lot of black people, and I shouldn't even just say black people, just like anybody who's who's a little more knowledgeable on the situation and has a little more like cultural context, can understand that that like a big part of the reason why black people tend to not like being quote unquote educated by white people about themselves is because white people can, like at any moment, they can just kind of ignore race as a factor in their day-to-day lives. They just don't have to think about it, whereas black people can't do that.
Yeah, actually, I've heard other. This is actually coming from a podcaster, comedian, saying that his white privilege is the fact that he doesn't have to feel like he's part of a group at all.
Mm-hmm.
And he wishes that everybody had that feeling that you didn't feel the pressure to identify in any particular group.
Yeah, I know like a lot of black people who are kind of like the only black friend in a group of white friends feel like a pressure to represent black people to their white friends, where they understand that they are they're not blind. They understand that they are the only black friend. They're probably like a lot of their white friends like only black friend, and so they know that the way that they act and the mannerisms that they have are, decently likely to inform how their friends are going to conceptualize black people on the whole. It's just kind of how like human beings, like our brains, like we're not wired to, look into to see every little interaction as like, oh, well, this could just be this one individual person.
Profile
like people. Yeah, exactly. Like it's impossible not to. And with a lot of minority, yeah, it's not just black people. With a lot of minorities, I
Sure.
think
Yeah.
I've heard that they're very acutely aware of that, and yeah, it puts a pressure on you to
So,
not.
so the
Yeah.
next scene we see, like we already mentioned this, but Monique. Well, actually, this is the same scene. Monique confides in Van about her husband. Like she's kind of complaining about him, and Van says, "Well, you married him, girl." And Monique says, "Yeah, I get this big ass house, and he gets the black wife he always wanted." And then she goes on to say, "I like Craig, but I love my money."
Hmm.
So to me, this is like kind of cringe worthy. You kind of like really see Monique's character here is, it's about the money for her, which is kind of sad in a way. And Monique, but Monique is like,
I mean, it's sad, but like I think it's the fact that she's self-aware about it that
yeah,
kind of saves it for me.
well, she
When Van asks her, when a peer of hers asks her about it, she's not trying to again, like she's being sincere about it. Like she's kind of putting up a mask to her husband,
yeah,
but
yeah, that's true.
she's very aware that like, I'm I guess you could say manipulating him in a sense, or yes, I think she looks at it as more of just a business
Yeah,
transaction.
that's right. But like the part that makes you cringe is like Van is this like somewhat, helpless character. She's looking to Monique for advice. And actually, Monique is giving her advice. And one of the things she says is the only way to stay fed in this world is to keep the right company. And
Hmm.
so this you would hope that this didn't have an element of truth in it.
Yeah, I
And
was gonna say very true.
and
This is actually really good
Van
advice.
even
You can take it
recognizes
cynically,
it.
or you can take it more, I guess, motivationally. But yeah, like have good connections, not just,
Yeah,
and that extends beyond just like have good friends, and also like have good business associates and stuff like that. Like that's a really really important part
yeah.
of living a healthy and productive life.
Yeah, there's definitely an element to networking with the right people. But Van sort of sees through this. She's like, it seems obvious to me that you don't think Craig really understands you. I mean, this isn't really
It's
shown
not
to us
necessarily that Van is like
clearly.
criticizing that like idea that you need to like keep that like you need to keep the right company to be fed. It's more so that she's saying like, that's true, but it does have this one consequence, which is that, if the people who you're keeping good relations with, if you're doing that by being insincere, then doesn't that kind of create a conflict of
Yeah,
interests where doesn't that mean like she's basically saying why are you not more upset that you have to wear a mask,
yeah,
because Vanessa, and again like Vanessa is kind of drunk now, and and so her mask is down. She's being more direct and about like what she thinks about Monique's situation, and it basically becomes clear that I think this is kind of like a core philosophy of Atlanta, if there were one, which is that some people are just more willing to wear the mask than others, and some
mhm,
people just aren't. Van and Ern are the type of people who just feel compelled to not kowtow to the systems that they know will benefit them, because they feel like it misrepresents them in doing so, or it demeans them in some way. But then there are people like Monique who will see the rewards that you get from doing that, and they decide that yeah, I'm okay being insincere if I get these benefits. And
yeah.
you know it's
But I mean,
I think it's kind of left up to the viewer to decide. I don't think it's more so saying that like one or the other is better, but just illustrating that like this is kind of the world we live in,
but Van
and
asks the right
trying to get the
question.
audience to think like which one are you,
Van asks
or
the
to
right
what
question.
degree. I think it's like a sliding spectrum.
Van says, why can't you have both? Why can't you have a husband that understands you,
Hmm.
and the security she gets from, his income or whatever it is.
Hmm.
And Monique's reply is curious, and this is actually where I um, made myself a note about who wrote this part of the script because she says, well, Craig told me something to read, and she's so in direct response to uh, Van uh, asking her question was, uh, do you feel sorry that you can't have both the understanding and the security from your husband? And her reply was to quote Craig, who said, "It's redundant to be both black and sorry in the world." And that actually creates like a pause. It actually created a pause in my head as well as in Van, the character. But then she's like, "Wait, you're quoting something from a movie, a Tyler Perry movie called Four Colored Girls," which I haven't seen that movie. But it made me stop the show, and I'm like, "Wait a minute, what exactly is she saying here? It's redundant to be both black and sorry in the world." So in the context of Monique and Van's conversation, I think Monique's use of that line is a misinterpretation. I think being black is not synonymous with being sorry. At least the definition of the word sorry is like the feeling of
You
being
mean
sorry.
like what you mean like that that's not when it was spoken in that movie that like that's not what it meant, or just that like it's an incorrect assessment?
I, well, that's what I thought was like the meta analysis of this writing was like it could be both. Like I've never seen the movie, so I don't know how the line was originally used, but like if you're using the word sorry in that context, which that was the conversation that I mean Van asked the question, Monique, are you sorry that you can't have both the understanding, the security from your husband? I mean that's the context of the feeling of being sorry or the emotion being sorry. So that's how Van is using it, and for Monique to reply, it's redundant to be both black and sorry in the world. That doesn't make sense to me. Uh, but maybe the writer was throwing this in because I mean obviously they must have seen the movie, but maybe the word sorry in that context is sorry in a like a sorry state of affairs. I suppose the line could be construed to mean black is synonymous with being in a sorry state of affairs, right? So not the feeling of being sorry, but being in a sorry that makes a little bit of sense to me. Like maybe the context of the movie that they pulled this out of, that's what they were trying to say. Otherwise,
I mean,
I don't get it.
I'd imagine it's just like being sorry and being black is redundant is just saying that like living as a black person, you're in America, you're already going to be dealing with a lot
With
of
sorrow,
a lot of shit. And
yeah,
so
that I could
like
get.
you're already it's like you're already going to be dealing with a lot of shit, and so to wallow in your own self-pity or to worry too much about like the systems that put you there is not really going to help you, and you should just kind of like I guess pull yourself up by your bootstraps. uh
Hmm.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, the like
It's
obviously
just like stop feeling sorry for
Monique's
yourself, I
situation
guess.
is pretty good. So like she probably doesn't feel sorry for herself.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say like it sounds like well, it seems like I think what she's getting at like it's an indirect answer to Van's question, but I think that by saying by saying it's redundant, like she seems to believe this, like by saying it's redundant to be black and sorry. I think that's her saying like she obviously knows that she's black, and so I think she's saying like yeah, of course I feel
Don't feel
sorry,
sorry for yourself.
or like she's saying like yeah, I think she's saying yeah, of course I feel sorry for myself. um However, like I'd feel sorry for myself whether I was rich or poor, right?
Hmm.
Like I'd feel sorry for myself if I was poor because I would know that I'm in that I was poor because of a system of oppression that had, oppressed black people for such a long time. And so she's saying like, okay, well, I can game that system by appealing to a man who's just looking for a black wife,
Hmm.
and I can feel sorry about being misunderstood. So I'd feel sorry in both situations. I'd have I'd have things to, to wallow about basically in both situations. But in one situation, I have a bunch of money and security, right? So she's saying like, I'll take the latter over the former. I think that's what she's getting at,
Yeah, I still I don't know
and
who
that's like her perspective,
I don't know who wrote that line, but it's a little confounding to me.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Yeah, and I think the fact that like it's lifted from a movie. I haven't seen that movie. I didn't even know. I thought that was like a magazine for black women.
no, there's a guy named Tyler Perry who makes a lot
Yeah,
of movies.
yeah,
He's a black movie maker. He's made a
yeah,
lot of movies.
yeah.
He
Well,
makes a
yeah,
lot of
that checks
money
out.
too. And,
Yeah, but I was gonna say, I'd say that the detail that this was a line that came from Craig,
yeah,
sounds again like like the sort of like Craig. I can just totally imagine Craig watching a movie written by a black director
yeah,
called For Black Women and being like, oh, I'm learning so much about
yeah,
black
yeah.
culture and this
I
the
actually looked
state
it
of the
up on
black
Rotten
African of the
Tomatoes
African
or
American.
IMDb or something. It's a movie about 10 like a whole bunch of different black women and their experiences. It
Mm-hmm.
didn't get very good reviews from the
Uh,
critics, but anyway, yeah, it makes sense with respect to Craig's character.
yeah,
Okay, so
yeah. Yeah. Anyway, wrapping up, we're getting to the
wait, we didn't
end of
do
the
Craig's
episode now.
crazy scatting beatnik
Yeah.
poetry, which is really odd. We see him like doing the reading or reciting this poetry about Jim Crow, and uh, there's a bunch of the guests that are sort of nodding in approval. But then we kind of zoom in on Ern's solemn face, and he's kind of hearing the voice through a tunnel as if he's having some sort of out of body experience. Uh, but then a man spills a drink at his feet, which kind of snaps Ern out of this daze. Ern recognizes the smell of Red Bull and vodka, which is funny because it kind of exposes the man who spilled the drink as sort of like a commoner like him, because this is another sort of stereotypical like drink that like a commoner would drink, I guess. Um, and then he's stopped.
A drink.
Ern is stopped by two staff members of the two of the wait staff who recognize him as Paperboy's manager, and they want a picture. And this ends up exposing Ern's identity to Monique, who's standing nearby there.
Yeah, well, I will say we got to point out that like the way in which he gets exposed is that they're like, yo, you're Paperboy's manager. My sister loves Paperboy. Here are her panties.
Yeah.
Here's her underwear. Give them to Paperboy. And Ern's like, why did you
What
have
the
your
hell?
sister's underwear on you just at a moment's notice? And he's just like, you never know.
I know, this is just absurd.
Perfect. Like, oh my god. Like, brilliant. Anyway.
Anyway, Monique is now aware that this is not who she thought it was, but she kind of says, "Oh, it's okay to make money with rap." She's sort of implying that she doesn't like rap, but she's okay with the fact that Ern's making money as a manager. Ern reveals that Paperboy is actually his cousin. This is his family. It's more than about the money. Uh, Craig's trying to tell Monique that she's missing the point, that this is actually cool, that Ern is involved in this. Paperboy is actually he's underground, he says, and that he's been following Paperboy from the beginning. And then he proceeds to mention the fact that there was a shooting, that Paperboy was involved in the shooting. Paperboy, I guess, Anna were involved in the shooting, and this raises eyebrows. And Monique says, "You aren't going to shoot up this party, are you, Ern?" And Ern is like clearly like annoyed with this comment, or he's just sort of stone faced at this point. And there's like an uncomfortable moment. And Monique says, "No, I was just fooling with you." But then she makes it worse by saying, "I get it. Every decent person has at least one trifling thug in the family." So this is like a direct insult towards Al, and by extension, she's insulting Ern. And this is kind of where like the play acting sort of ends. Ern breaks character and says, "This is whack. this is not real. This is dumb. And he tells Craig to stop stunting on me about my culture. So this is kind of the punchline, I think, of the episode for me, is Ern is just coming right out and saying, to Craig to stop doing that. He says, "I'm not going back to Africa because I'm fucking broke." Like, he's pointing out like the the problem here with that thought. That,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, like I mentioned, I mentioned it before, but it's like this is like Craig has, he's got like good intentions, I guess, but like what he misses is the fact that he's trying to approach the issue of like racism from a extremely privileged perspective, where he has the privilege to be able to go to Africa and do all this stuff that isn't, and like and have his food look like Atlantic slave ships, and have his, and like have custom drinks and all this stuff, and buy, I guess, like black vinyl albums and all this stuff that just like people like Ern, just who are down at ground level, like they just can't afford to do. And the fact that he can do it all with like kind of impunity, and the fact that he can just kind of, again, it's like it's a hobby for him, where he's an optometrist.
Yeah.
Presumably he doesn't bring this into his work. Like, this isn't something that he like makes a part of his everyday life. Like, yeah, exactly. It's not his culture at all, and yet he's trying to surround himself with it and act like he knows just as much. Yeah. Which is, insulting to Ern, because Ern can't just go to work and leave all of the black culture behind,
Yeah, so Craig tries to apologize, but this agitates Ern even more, and they're going out the door at this point, and Ern is like, "No, don't do that. Stop being so likable." And
I think that's Ern.
He's like, "And don't act like you understand, because you don't understand." So
yeah,
that's the last.
Yeah,
exchange.
that's something. Yeah, that's something that I feel like you hear from a lot of when black people who are willing to sort of spoon feed like a lot of black issues to their white audiences or friends and stuff. A lot of the time, just the phrase like "you just do not understand" comes up, and it's the kind of thing where it's like, it's not necessarily like an indictment. It's not saying like you don't understand and that's bad. It's more so just like a fact of life, that like, because white people, grow up having that privilege to not have to think about their race and not have to feel like they are a part of a group, like that's just gonna inherently like color your perception of the world. Joke intended.
So do you think I mean, the way this kind of bleeds over into like reality, I guess, if we want to say that, or like how, like, there's so much talk about having a dialogue, having a real dialogue with the black.
Yeah, no, I think that
black,
kind of thing is
Black
important.
Lives Matter and that kind of stuff, and people putting things on their social media profile in support of Black lives. Do you think this really like gives comfort to black people, or do they look at it like the way they look at Craig? Like, this is just
I think a lot of
signaling.
If it's, obviously from my own perspective, I can't speak for any individual black people, but I get the impression, and from people that I've heard, that there is certainly a lot of virtue signaling. And although, a lot of like the virtue signaling and the white saviorism doesn't necessarily harm black people, it is very annoying and very, it's very annoying and frustrating. And what would really be ideal is like what I was saying about, not making yourself the main character, where what's really frustrating for a lot of minorities is when the majority, in this case, we're talking white people, they want to be the main character. They want like credit, and they want to be recognized as a hero and a savior of black people, even though they really, like, although they can help in a lot of situations, they're just not really equipped with the life experience to understand intuitively what all of the issues that, plague, I guess, the African American experience. And so it would be more helpful if they like tried to uplift like black voices. Like if you're a white content creator, instead of making a video yourself explaining a lot of explaining like black issues, you should just use your platform to boost the voice of somebody who's within that community, right? Or if you're like in a music industry or any other real industry, like giving opportunities and like job opportunities or money or like scholarships or I don't know, anything like that, just like giving those opportunities to black individuals and like kind of and just saying like asking those communities like what can we do to help instead of trying to decide that for yourself.
Better socioeconomic
Yeah.
situation, not to just pretend to understand the historical.
Yeah, exactly. Like like we've all heard like, and it sounds like this is kind of exactly what Craig has done. But I'm sure it's a popular story where it's like where like a college white person like takes like a 2-week trip to Africa, and they're like oh I've done such a, and they're like oh I've done such, it's not even just like a race thing, it's also just like a helping third world countries thing where they'll like
they want to make themselves feel better about this.
Yeah, they just want to make themselves feel better. They want to make themselves feel like they've helped. And and it can come from like in this case it's kind of like complicated intentions, because on the one hand it's certainly not like people like Craig don't care about, it doesn't seem like he doesn't care about black people, but it seems like he's definitely primarily it seems like he's primarily motivated by looking like a hero. Like if he weren't getting any recognition, or he didn't have any impression that he was a hero or he was the main character for doing any of this, I don't think we'd hear a peep about him and how much like, oh, how African American people are so unfairly treated in this country, and they need to reconnect with their roots and that kind of thing, and they need to slay the like dragon that is white supremacy and stuff like that. Like I don't think we'd see any of that if there were no opportunity for people like Craig to feel self-important.
You know what else crossed my mind? I had never thought about it until this specific scenario where, like, what if you're a white guy who's attracted to a black woman, you get married, or does the white guy, is he obliged to like adopt this like some sort of Craig-like attitude?
I mean, certainly not like Craig. We wouldn't. It seems like the show's pretty clearly an indictment against Craig. But I mean, I would say that just I don't know. I'd say first and foremost, you should prioritize what's going to make your partner comfortable. If you're if you're a white guy and you're dating or married to or in any kind of relationship with a black individual.
It's probably more important what the perspective is from the other side, like in this case.
Well, I mean,
black woman.
You should probably just like if you feel like the issue comes up, you should probably just be like, hey, partner, like, would you like, am I doing anything that makes you uncomfortable, or just talk to him, like that's like the big thing that that Craig seems to fail at, is he just misinterpret, at a point like when Ern says the like this spooky thing called slavery happened that erased my entire ethnic identity, and Craig just puts a hand on his shoulder and he's like, exactly. And it's obvious that Craig has completely misinterpreted what Ern just told him, right?
Yeah, he's pretending.
I think like the the real solution that I agree with and that I think the show advocates for is just like as like for like PSA to all white people, just just listen genuinely to what like black people are saying, needs to be like, or what like black people, seem to feel should be like they should be accommodated for, or what the actual issues are and how they can be solved, and put your ego aside and don't care about how many likes you're going to get, like care about actually helping people, prioritize that first and foremost. And like if actually helping people happens to net you some clout or whatever, and you get positive recognition, like that's fine, but that shouldn't be your motivation for that, like I think that's what this whole episode is really getting at.
So we're left with a kind of a interesting scene at the end. So on the drive home, so that Ern is apologizing to Van as they're driving away. Like he said, he'll apologize to Monique, but Van apparently is turned on by whatever Ern just did to sort of genuinely.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think. I mean, I wouldn't say that like I guess specifically like turned her on, but like
Well,
she just like finds
she
herself.
tells him to pull over, and she kisses him,
Well,
and then
yeah.
mounts
I
him
think.
in
I mean,
the
I don't.
driver's
Yeah. Well,
seat
yeah. I
of
don't
the
think it's like a
car.
specifically like sex thing. I think it's just like an intimacy thing that she like
Oh, really?
expresses
Oh,
via sex.
haha.
I don't know. I don't think it. I mean, like that's neither here nor there. I just don't think that
Well,
like humans
I think it's
like
an
are
interesting
purely sex
thing
is
that
more
they
than
wrote
just
into
animals.
Van's character. Like she was, it was all her idea that they go in there and act like somebody they're not, and then uh, Ern just like blows it all up in the end. He's like, nah, screw it. Well, I'm not playing this game anymore. At the end, like basically, you know, tells Monique and Craig, that this is weird. She's like, this is a weird place, and in the end, Van like she apparently liked that the end result of that. I mean, I don't know why she would have ended up having sex with him in the car at the end of all of that.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, I think that it's. I mean, like, okay.
So she's
I
fickle,
think
I guess
obviously
is
it's
what I'm
just
saying.
Van.
Her character is
Van
fickle.
finds. Van is like pretty disgusted and doesn't like Ern. At the beginning of the episode throughout, and it's very clear that she hates wearing the mask, and Ern just goes mask off at the end of the episode. He calls out exactly like she says, "You think I like prostituting myself
Yeah.
to like get this?" So she's obviously not happy about what she has to do, and or what she feels she has to do to take care of Lottie, and Ern is basically just like taking the weight off her shoulders, right? And he's like calling out this guy for all of the the things that make him and Van uncomfortable, and she finds that like admirable, and and that makes that kind of redeems Ern in her eyes, and that makes him seem like more of a man, I guess. And
she's schizophrenic. I think that maybe I'm giving things away, but in upcoming episodes,
yeah.
she like really flips back and forth, like on how she treats Ern, and just her inconsistent behavior. I think
I mean,
that's
I
a
don't know if
recurring
I'd
thing.
call that schizophrenia, but
Well, yeah, I won't spoil it, but there's an
if
episode
I mean,
coming
if
up that she definitely has identity issues.
I mean, according to you, everybody in this show has identity issues.
I think they do, and I mean it's mentioned specifically here, right? I mean, doesn't Ern actually? What does he say?
I'm just saying, like, schizophrenia is not the same
No,
as
no.
dissociative identity disorder, which is not the
She's
same
not.
as borderline
She
personality
doesn't
disorder,
fit the medical definition, but
which doesn't. Yeah, I don't know. But
yeah,
I would just say, like, I don't think that it's necessarily that she like has a fetish for black guys telling off white guys. It's just that she finds this quality of Ern like admirable, and she finds herself like attracted to him in all aspects now.
and
Like when
she's
you're
drunk.
mad at yeah, like when you're mad at somebody, even if you find them like objectively, or like like physically like attractive or whatever. Like there's plenty of stuff that people can do that would make you not want to sleep with them despite them being like traditionally attractive, right?
Yeah,
You know.
yeah,
And like Ern just like showed off a really nice quality of his
yeah,
that,
yeah.
you know, that Van really appreciates. And I don't know. I just like I don't know if I would like categorize it as like just purely like a sex thing, you know.
No, I think, but it's another clever ending to
It's also
an
just like a
episode.
nice
It throws a little
like
twist in there
shorthand
at the
for
end.
the like the audience of just saying like her just like kissing him is like a really short way to like communicate a lot about how she feels about him now,
Yeah,
right? Like it's kind of a tension build up where it's like, oh, is she gonna get out of the car? Is she like when she's like pull over or whatever, is she gonna like get angry at him? Is she gonna like start hitting him or something because she doesn't want
right.
to like cause a fight while he's driving or whatever? And then it's like, oh, okay, actually she was happy about
Yeah,
what just happened, you know. So it's like,
but yeah, we'll revisit Van's character in the upcoming episodes, and yeah, there's more to be said about her. So let's leave it
yeah,
at that.
yep,
It's end of episode. We're pretty much well. We got one more episode of
one more in
season 1.
episode 1 or one more in season 1.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right. Well, that was a good one. We're at an
yeah,
hour and a
yeah,
half now. So
yeah.
you want
So
to close us
hopefully,
out?
yeah. So hopefully you guys will stick around for that final episode. Where yeah, real close to it. That'll be next week. And I already told you all about the Patreon stuff, but you know, if you're less interested in supporting directly monetarily, you know, a like, a subscribe, you know, especially sharing the podcast around is always appreciated. You know, those things, they're not just little meaningless like telling you, hey, I like the show. It does actually tell YouTube and other streaming services, you know, hey, we like this and you should show it to more people. So yeah, with that, I think we're gonna close out. Thanks for listening as
Good
always,
night, everybody.
and we'll see you next time.